The Memphis Grizzlies drop a tough one in San Antonio to the Spurs on NBC and Peacock National TV. Got to see the current state of the Grizzlies. They are 1-9 in their last 10 games, playing some of the worst basketball we've seen in some time from Memphis. What has gone wrong? What can we take away that is positive in any way, shape, or form? And what can be done to solve the issues? Let's break it down here on this edition of the podcast. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax. Happy to be with you once more talking Grizzlies basketball for the next 30 minutes or so. It is a tough time in Memphis to be a Grizzlies fan, to say the least. We're going to break it all down as best we can on this edition of the show. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. We are free and available here on Locked On Grizzlies as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day, now proudly a member also of the #1 sports podcast network out there. So grateful for everyone that has helped us here at Locked On Grizzlies play a small part in that statement being true. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing, wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube, literally anywhere. Continue to help us grow our tiny little corner of the internet we like to call Locked On Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies are 1-9 in their last 10 contests. 1-9. This is the worst stretch of basketball that the Grizzlies have played since January and February of 2024, when guys like Jacob Gilyard and Trey Jamison III were starting basketball games for the Memphis Grizzlies. On one hand, it's mildly depressing that it wasn't that long ago that was true. On the other hand, a lot has transpired in the last 20 months or so to lead us to this current stretch of difficulty for the Memphis Grizzlies. And I do think it's important to point out that context matters. The Grizzlies have been ravaged by injuries. They were ravaged by injuries back then too. But the Grizzlies have been ravaged by injuries. They do not have a single healthy point guard on the roster at this time. That is just factual. That is true. The Grizzlies have Vince Williams Jr., who is a point guard by loose adjacent association only, doing his best to create offense for himself and others. And in fairness, I would argue Vince Williams Jr. was absolutely not the reason that the Grizzlies lost to the San Antonio Spurs. In fact, one of the great ironies of the situation here is Vince Williams Jr., you can argue, had one of the best games for the Grizzlies. For one thing, 9 assists, 1 turnover. 9 assists to 1 turnover for the Bug, making smart plays with the basketball, gathering rebounds, 8 rebounds. Vince Williams Jr. almost had a triple-double against the San Antonio Spurs. It wasn't on the guy that logic would dictate. It would be on because he is playing so aggressively out of position. You could argue the other 4 Grizzly starters moving forward should be the Grizzly starters moving forward. Jaren Jackson Jr., Cedric Howard, Jalen Wells, Zack Edey. So in terms of the starting lineup, the Grizzlies were fairly well off, and you could argue that the San Antonio Spurs were worse off among the starters. No Victor Wembanyama, MVP candidate. No Stephon Castle, former Rookie of the Year. Those things add up. It's not like the Spurs were a model of health in this contest either. But Vince Williams Jr., Cedric Howard's going to get the headlines, and deservedly so. We're going to talk more about Ced here in a moment. For me, the player of the game was Vince Williams Jr. I thought Vince Williams Jr. was tremendous in this game for the Memphis Grizzlies, and he did exactly what Memphis needed him to do to have a chance to win the game. And single game plus minus is a flawed stat, not denying that at all. Vince Williams Jr. was a plus 11 in the 30 minutes that he was on the court for the Memphis Grizzlies. The next closest Grizzly, Zack Edey at plus 4. Vince Williams Jr., the Bug is back, and that's a good thing for the Grizzlies. They desperately need him, especially with the current state of play at the guard position for Memphis. I also think it's important to point out that Zack Edey's importance to the Memphis Grizzlies rotations, their defensive and offensive scheme, as much as it may pain us to acknowledge that a second-year player is that significant for this team, Zack Edey may very well be that significant for this team. And he was not the most efficient scorer in the contest. He was 4 of 10, and obviously a lot of his shots are at and around the rim, but 11 rebounds for Zack Edey, 2 blocks for Zack Edey. This is somebody who helps in so many ways to create so much room to operate for every member of the roster on both ends of the court. So Zack Edey still playing within a minutes restriction, not seeing the amount of time that perhaps Grizzlies fans would like to see Zack Edey get, but he still holds a valuable role in what these Grizzlies are going to be moving forward, whatever that looks like as this season that is unraveling quicker than I think anybody thought it would. That sentence sucks to say out loud, but it is true. This is a bad basketball team right now. Zack Edey is a guy that is going to be a key cog of the future plans, regardless of what the season holds for this version of the team. Edey looked good, still needs to get his rhythm on his shot, missed way too many bunnies at the rim. At 7'4", 290 pounds, you would like for him to just finish some dunks instead of trying these hook shots. But at the same time, he'll find his footing. I think that his importance, if you watch that game, was pretty evident on both ends of the floor. And Cedric Howard, what more can be said about the rookie? Not afraid of the moment, 5 of 7 from beyond the arc, really impressive shooting, did a strong job being there when the Grizzlies needed him to be there. Wasn't the case with every member of the roster, and we'll talk more about that here in a moment. But Cedric Howard is going to get the highlights. He's going to get the accolades. For me, the player of the game was Vince Williams Jr., but Cedric Howard, there's no denying, as a rookie, he is making the kind of impact that will be an all-rookie team type of contribution, and he's in the Rookie of the Year conversation. There's several rookies that have had really strong starts to their NBA careers. Cedric Howard is absolutely in that mix, and at the very least, Memphis will, for another season in a row, have an all-NBA, all-rookie NBA contributor, would be my guess, as long as Cedric is able to stay on the court. Those were the positives, those guys. And I think Cam Spencer deserves an honorable mention shout out. He had probably one of his best offensive games of his NBA career. 15 points, 3 of 7 from beyond the arc, consistently scoring the ball, but he was a team worst minus 23 in plus minus. And I think one of the reasons for that is he logged a lot of minutes with some of the guys I'm about to talk about in a negative light. But he also was being targeted late in the contest. Him defending De'Aaron Fox, Fox was too athletic, too quick off the bounce. It was a mismatch, and the Spurs saw that pretty quickly. And part of the reason things disintegrated for the Grizzlies was Spencer not being able to be what Memphis needed him to be as an on-ball defender in the spot that he was in. So again, Cam Spencer, one of those guys being asked to do a lot more than he should be asked to do at this stage of the game. Offensively, he was there. Defensively, it was inconsistent. Guys to be worried about, and we'll talk more about the big name later on in the show. Jock Landale probably should not play again for the Memphis Grizzlies. And I know I've said that about Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in terms of not being a starter moving forward for KCP. I thought KCP, while he still wasn't good, looked better for longer spurts of time against the Spurs than he has in some time. Jock Landale is a liability. 2 for 9 from the field, 7 rebounds. Cedric Howard out-rebounded him. Vince Williams Jr. out-rebounded him. He had 2 turnovers to 2 assists, more turnovers for Landale in 18 minutes played than Vince Williams Jr. in 30. Again, what are we talking about here? Right? What are we talking about here with Landale? The idea that he's needed to be a screener, the idea that he's needed to be a rebounder, I'm not buying it. You have guys like Santi Aldama that could eat some of those minutes. You have guys like Jalen Wells, Cedric Howard as he comes out of those minutes restrictions. Same thing with Zack Edey. I would rather see John Conchar at this point. I'd rather see Cam Spencer. I would rather see a KCP. I would rather those guys get increased opportunity. Heaven forbid Gigi Jackson gets some run. I've seen enough of Jock Landale, and I really struggle with this idea that he's necessary for a screening purpose. The things that are said that he needs to do for this Grizzlies team to be successful, he's not doing half of it when it comes to the rebounding side of things. So I said on X at Joe Mullinax, his struggles are a lot more palatable when he's not starting. So I'm glad Zack Edey is back in that regard. But how in the world he sees minutes when this team, if they're ever healthy, is beyond me. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we are going to take a look at the biggest issue, and it's a name that I conveniently left out. Two names, to be honest with you, one of whom kind of upset some rhythm the Grizzlies were going into in terms of going on a run, and the other one really helped the Spurs close out the contest aggressively. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Let's talk it out. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Skims. When Skims announced that they were making underwear for men, the reaction made perfect sense. People have been talking about Skims comfort for years. Most guys, though, stick to whatever they've been buying since college. The same fits, same waistbands that roll, and a whole lot of settling. Skims Men's changes that. One upgrade, and it's obvious why everybody has been talking about it. They are designed to feel good, fit right, and actually stay put with no slipping, no sagging, no adjusting. Just genuinely great underwear that makes you feel confident and comfortable. If you are a fan of boxer briefs, for example, that's more my speed. I love the fit in the fabric. It's soft, it's supportive, it's comfortable all day. And whether you're working out, traveling, whatever the case might be, maybe you're just hanging out at home, they feel better than anything that you have used before. Shop Skims Men's now at skims.com. You may not know what to expect when it comes to underwear, but it's a game changer. It completely surprises me, and it'll completely surprise you too. And when you place that order at skims.com, you should choose podcast in the post-purchase survey and select our show from the drop-down. Be sure to let them know that we sent you. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by the good folks over at FanDuel. Basketball season is here. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Even if you missed the start of a game, maybe you're getting home late from an event, maybe you're coming in at a certain point because you saw that it was a really good contest and you want to see the end of the game. If you want to ride the hot hand, if you want to find the perfect number for whatever type of bet you're looking for, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is trying to make that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Jaren Jackson Jr. For those of you that have been following the show for a while, you know I'm a Jaren Jackson Jr. fan. You're an everydayer, hopefully. You're a major reason why we are the number one Locked On podcast network, sports network, all those sorts of things. You are familiar with my appreciation for what Jaren Jackson Jr. brings to the table. Now, with all of that being said, you never want to put the entire blame for a loss on any individual player, because I think that is a fool's errand. Obviously, there are lots of things that play into a basketball game, that play into any sporting event. Lots of plays, lots of players. It's never one person's fault. However, for the Memphis Grizzlies, there is one guy that has a near max contract that played in the contest against the San Antonio Spurs. There's one guy who is allegedly an all NBA talent, who has, in fairness to them, shown those flashes on numerous occasions, a multi-time All-Star. There is one guy on the team that has won a Defensive Player of the Year award, that has national accolades. It's Jaren Jackson Jr. And Jaren Jackson Jr. was completely non-existent when his team needed him most. It's important to point out that the game was a Grizzlies lead, 101-100, with 2 minutes and 28 seconds left in the contest. From there, Harrison Barnes makes a bucket. Cedric Howard misses a shot, and so does Jaren Jackson Jr. in the wake of that. Then Harrison Barnes makes another bucket. Guess who the primary defender on Harrison Barnes was for both of those particular shots? Jaren Jackson Jr. And if you're thinking, is that the Harrison Barnes from like the Golden State Warriors days, Sacramento Kings? He's still in the league? Yeah, he's still in the league. And apparently he is still good enough to cook an allegedly elite defensive player in Jaren Jackson Jr. So the Spurs are now up 104 to 101. Then Zack Edey misses a 2-point shot. Barnes makes a 3, but it's important to point out Jaren was in a different defensive rotation. Not entirely Jaren's fault on that particular make. But after that Barnes 3, if you're keeping up wherever you're handing out to the podcast, that's a personal 7-0 run for Harrison Barnes. The Spurs are now up 107 to 101. The Grizzlies make a bad pass. A young player coming out of a timeout, and Cedric Howard, makes a poor choice. The Spurs take advantage, drive to the ball. Then Coward loses the ball again. So 2 tough turnovers for the rookie late in winning time contest. And then De'Aaron Fox makes a dunk, and that is where the final score winds up. So again, in a 2-minute and 28-second spurt of time, the San Antonio Spurs go on a run that puts them up for good. And the Grizzlies don't score again. The last bucket that the Grizzlies made was with 3 minutes and 13 seconds left on the clock, and it was a Cedric Howard made 3. In those last 3 minutes of the contest, Jaren Jackson Jr. attempted 1 shot. Jaren Jackson Jr., the near max contract player, the guy that is a multi-time All-Star, former Defensive Player of the Year, he attempted 1 shot in the last 3 minutes and 18 seconds of that game. That is unacceptable. That's unacceptable. And again, I'm somebody that is very comfortable saying that on this podcast because I have supported Jaren Jackson Jr. I have said numerous times that he is the actual face of this franchise. He's the guy that puts on the show for the Grizzlies as an organization, that goes out, does the media, goes out and does the local events, represents the team and the city extremely well. I supported the contract 100%, and I still do. It's a bad night. Jaren has had one of the better offensive starts of his career this season. But the last couple of games, and tonight in particular, when the Grizzlies needed him most, late in the contest, when he was the vet, again, go back to that starting 5. Vince Williams Jr., Jalen Wells, Zack Edey, Cedric Howard. Jaren Jackson Jr. is the old head among that group. Jaren was not there on either end of the court. Not able to start Harrison Barnes, or not able to stop Harrison Barnes on one end, and not offensively engaged on the other. And then on the flip side, before that, one of the guys that was offensively engaged, Cedric Howard, was pulled out of the contest after going on his own personal 8-0 run, making a couple of threes, some big shots, helping Memphis take the lead. The Spurs call timeout, and when the teams come back from timeout, Cedric Howard is out of the contest. And the first thing that came to my mind, and I posted it on X later, are the Grizzlies trying to tank? Are we at that stage of the season? Have we been there for an extended period of time where the Grizzlies are just actively trying to not win basketball games? I understand that Cedric Howard has a minutes restriction. So does Zack Edey. But you could have taken that time away in a different spot. You had the Spurs on the ropes, Coach Isolo. You had a young player building confidence, getting into a rhythm. And that has been one of the concerns and frustrations of the Isolo system to this point. The hockey shift mantra, the idea behind that, the logic behind it. The pace is so quick and they have to be fresh. You have somebody that looks mighty fresh, scoring the basketball at a pretty high clip at a key time in the game when you're trying to build a lead, and it was completely derailed because the guy in Cedric Howard that was building confidence, a clearly significant part of your organization moving forward, the choice was made to take him out of the game when he was feeling good, scoring the ball the way the team needed it to be scored. The Grizzlies fell apart in the fourth quarter. The Grizzlies only scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. That is abysmal offense. The Grizzlies were up going into the final frame. The Grizzlies, again, I will point out, had the lead late in the contest, and it fell through their fingers. The guys that, in my opinion, wear that the most are the head basketball coach, but even more importantly than that, the guy that is making a heck of a lot of money to be, at worst, the second best player on the team. At best, the first best player. He was not that for the Grizzlies in this contest. He was not the leader. He was not the aggressor that he was in the last game. We talked about the positivity of that against Cleveland, getting to the free throw line, being the aggressor, trying to score the basketball. Guess how many free throws Jaren Jackson Jr. attempted in this contest? Just guess. If you want to look it up on the box score real quick, go ahead. I don't have to look it up in the box score because it's a big fat goose egg, a 0. The Grizzlies only attempted 9 free throws. The Spurs only attempted 13. So if you want to make an argument that it was the officiating, it was both sides. They let the guys play. You got to be aggressive. You got to get to the rim. Force them to make a call. Or at least be an offensive weapon, using your frame the way that you should be capable of using it. Jaren did not do that, and that hurt the Grizzlies. And he wasn't his defensive aggressor either when the game was on the line. Harrison Barnes took him to school, and that can't happen if the Grizzlies hope to actually try to dig out of this hole. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out this episode of the show trying to think of solutions. How can this actually be addressed in a positive way? Can Memphis find a way out without Ja Morant in the fold? We'll talk about that next here on the podcast. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies brought to you by the good folks over at Rippling. I'm a big fan of Rippling. You should be as well. Rippling does a great job if you're a business owner in particular, because here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier, but now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS, that's sad. Software as a disservice, and that's why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. Everything from onboarding to payroll to IT access runs automatically and perfectly in sync, and it is seriously simple to use. It gives companies one source of truth for their people, data, and everything that they touch. Whether you want to run your entire HR, IT, and finance operations as one, or you just want to fill the gaps in your software stack, Rippling can do it all. And right now, you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/lockedonnba. Learn more at rippling.com/lockedonnba. That's rippling.com/lockedonnba for 6 months free. Go check them out today. Closing out this edition of the podcast, I am Joe Mullinax here with you. Not the happiest show, right? Disappointment in Jaren Jackson Jr., disappointment in Tuomas Isolo, excitement for young players, Vince Williams Jr., Zack Edey, Cam Spencer, Cedric Howard. There were good things that happened against the Spurs, but the guys that you're depending on to help you win are not actively doing it. And when that is the case, that is going to be a real difficult thing for the Grizzlies to overcome. So how do we fix this, right? How can this be addressed? What, if anything, can be done to get the Grizzlies right? Because this was a game that Memphis wanted. I would argue that given the current state of the schedule, it's not a game that the Grizzlies needed. I wrote about this over at our Substack for Grizzly Bear Blues yesterday or on Tuesday. The Grizzlies schedule, they lost to the Spurs without Wembanyama, without Castle. That's not great. Missed opportunity. When Cedric Howard is your leading scorer and your leading rebounder and Jaren Jackson Jr. played in the game, there's your sign. But here's the schedule ahead. Sacramento, not a good basketball team right now, just like the Grizzlies. Dallas, not a good basketball team right now, just like the Grizzlies. Denver, very good basketball team. That's going to be tough for Memphis. That's going to be a tough one, right? But after that, the Pelicans, not a good basketball team. The Clippers, not a good basketball team. The Kings, again, currently not a good basketball team. The San Antonio Spurs, Wembanyama almost certainly will still be out. Stephon Castle will probably be back by December 2nd. But you're not going to have to see Wembanyama there more than likely. And then you have the Clippers again. Still currently not a good basketball team. And then you end this run here with the Portland Trailblazers. The best team of the names I just mentioned that aren't the Denver Nuggets, still a 500 basketball club at the moment. So the point is, this is a very light section of the schedule. The Grizzlies have to take advantage. How do they take advantage? For one, you hope that the minutes restrictions get lifted and you see more Zack Edey, you see more Cedric Howard. Your best players got to play basketball if you want to win games. I know that's the high-level analysis that you come to the Locked On Podcast Network for. That's what makes us number one among sports podcast networks, is hot takes like that. But you got to play your best guys. If your best players are on the floor, you're going to have a better opportunity to compete. Sometimes it's that freaking simple. So you got to hope that those minutes restrictions start to get eased a little bit. And you also have to hope that your best player, Jaren Jackson Jr., shows up and plays like the best player. And it's not a rookie in Cedric Howard outplaying him. It's not Vince Williams Jr., a guy dramatically outside of his ideal position, outplaying him. Those are two names that never should be mentioned as outplaying a veteran leader on your team. But that's exactly what occurred. That's exactly what transpired. The Grizzlies struggled mightily against the Spurs because in part of Jaren's struggles. And that shouldn't be something that's said if you are actively trying to win basketball games. Now, as I mentioned earlier, maybe the Grizzlies aren't trying to win basketball games. You have to continue to lean into Zack Edey being a force. No other team in the NBA has a 7'4", 290-pound center that moves the way he does, that can control the paint, dominate the boards. There was a play against San Antonio where he was a traditional big, grabbing the rebound, never bringing it below his head, just going straight back up on the offensive glass and scoring the putback bucket. He can do that very consistently. He just has to physically do it consistently. That is a mismatch every time down the court, just about. Memphis has to take advantage of those opportunities. They have to. And they have to continue to allow for players like Cam Spencer to get opportunity to grow into the role that they're being asked to play. Cam Spencer probably isn't a rotation player if Ja Morant and Scottie Pippen Jr. and Ty Jerome are out on the court. But Ja's not going to be out there for a while. Neither is Scottie. Ty Jerome probably won't be out there for at least another week. So you're going to continue to depend on Cam Spencer. Give him more opportunity. What are we hoping Jock Landale is going to be? Play small. Give G.G. Jackson an opportunity. Give somebody else a chance, like OMP. You have to try to vary what you're doing. I'm not convinced the Grizzlies are playing their best players right now. I'm not convinced that they are giving themselves the best chance to compete right now. Now, if you're Tuomas Isolo and you're an everydayer to Locked On Grizzlies and you're watching or listening, you're thinking to yourself, Joe doesn't know what he's talking about. I can't control what Jaren Jackson Jr. does on the court. I can't help that my rookie, who you're so high on, Joe, gave up 2 key turnovers late in the game that helped San Antonio go on the run that you were complaining about. And that's fair. Players play. But there has to be an acknowledgement that there are certain guys in the rotation right now. And to be honest with you, for me, one guy in particular, in Jock Landale, who should not be there. And the argument that they need to be there because of their screening, because of their rebounding, it doesn't hold water. Make an adjustment. Adapt or die. Right now, your season is on life support, and it is the middle of November. That is not a good freaking sentence to say out loud. It is on the coaches to tweak, and it is on the players to take ownership. Jaren Jackson Jr. needs to own this loss, even if it's not entirely his fault. Part of leadership is owning losses. He should own the way that game concluded, and he should take it upon himself to help get this team where they need to go over these next several games, because every single game coming up is going to be a fight. Memphis isn't blowing out anybody. But aside from the Denver Nuggets, every single game coming up over the next week and a half to 2 weeks is winnable. Every single one, except for the Denver game. We could be looking back on this stretch in 2 weeks and saying the Grizzlies saved their season. Nobody is advocating for them being above 500 with their injury issues. But this is the stretch where they need to get closer to 500 so they can go on a little bit of a run when they get Ja and Ty Jerome in particular back into the mix. Thanks for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. The next time we're together, we will preview the next Grizzlies game. DeMichael and I will be back together talking all things San Antonio trip for DeMichael. DeMichael not with me on this show because he's there covering Grizzlies Spurs. So we'll talk about that trip that he had. Maybe DeMichael has some grandiose vision. Maybe I'll ask him if he thinks the team is tanking. Lots of different angles we can take going into our next show. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing, wherever you get podcasts. And after you make us your first listen every day, make sure for your second listen, you're going to check out Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Josh Lloyd hosts the #1 fantasy basketball podcast, giving you daily tips and helping you win your league, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And remember, we are now the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you for helping us be that. Make sure you are liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing. If you haven't already done so, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Make our podcast here, Locked On Grizzlies, part of your everyday NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption. Until next time, shout out to Vince Williams Jr., shout out to Cedric Coward, shout out to Zack Edey and Cam Spencer. Youth will be served. Veterans need to step up. We'll catch you next time on Locked On Grizzlies.